We're live.
We're live. Looks like we're live. Brilliant. Hello, and welcome to this little show discussing Bitcoin's relationship to socialism. I'm Ben, on Twitter as BT Socialist. I am a socialist. I'm here with my friend Oliver here, and he also has similar ideas. So we're here to discuss how that impacts Bitcoin and how we think it can relate to Bitcoin. Do you want to say hello?
Hello there, I'm Oliver Masisare. Oliver, better known as Oliver Masisare on Twitter. I'm a socialist too, so since the pool is very small right now, I'll be expressing my important views in the internet. Hello.
So my background is I'm a teacher. I was a teacher up until last year. I taught for just over 10 years. Teachers in the UK, we have quite a good work-life balance. You know, we get paid a decent enough salary. We have good access to holidays. Whereas, as I understand it, in the US, it's not quite like that. One of the reasons teachers have such sort of respect for their profession and they get paid a decent salary is because we've got the teaching union in the UK is one of the strongest unions, and they're not afraid to strike if they need to. So we've been able to keep and maintain a decent wage, which is very important. But as I understand it, obviously it's kind of different in the US there. So that's really kind of where I came from. And so, as a socialist, what I would term a socialist, I believe in sort of access to healthcare, universal access to education, and I believe that it's important for people to look after one another, and that, to me, is done through socialist initiatives. I also believe that capitalism, as wonderful a thing as it is, and free markets as wonderful as a thing as they are, if left unchecked, will kind of steamroll through human beings and not really care about them. So there needs to be some balance. So as a socialist, I wouldn't, obviously not a full-on state socialist who Stalinist, Leninist type. I'm more of a moderate, more of a non-statist. I believe that we should minimize the role of government, but then maximize people's social mobility and people's ability to improve their own lives and liberate people, which is important. So, Oliver, how about you? What's your background in relation to socialism?
Well, I've always had left ideas, and you read on them. Well, the history of Mexico and the left is also all Latin America. It's coups, betrayals, misinformation campaigns, propaganda. So I always knew that or suspected that there was something that was hidden beneath Mexican society, and there's a rich history of lefty politics, communes, ideas in Mexico, but I forgot about that. Then I grew up, went to high school in the United States, and I see the contrast now. Or back then I was aware of it, right? But the inequality that people in Tijuana, because I lived in Tijuana, were subject to, like you can see the horrors of capitalism, maquiladoras, sweatshops, right? So I always knew I was privileged. I think that we have an obligation to try to improve society in Mexico and also in the United States, because it's not perfect, It's I can see that here now. It's pretty obvious that we need a stronger social safety net. We don't have free healthcare. We don't have free education. Basically, 70% of someone's income goes to just living, surviving. that's not a sustainable way to, or nice way to live in a society. Yeah, I'm not against money. I mean, I'm into Bitcoin because of that. I mean, because, you know, it's pretty interesting what these ideas have to offer. But at the same time, damn, the culture of Bitcoin and capitalism, or anarcho-capitalism, which is what you hear most of it, it's like, we don't want the state, we don't want anybody, we just want money, and we want to influence people with money. And some people say, you are not going to take what's mine. And they say taxation is theft. I mean, we have to live in a society. I mean, we live in a society, it's a fact. And, well, libertarianism is something that it's nice, but then you dig a little bit deeper, and there's quite a few things that go unaddressed, and I think that we need a little bit of left in this space. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the US, I mean, because I mean, yeah, honestly, talking about some of this stuff in and around Europe, it's people have a much more grown-up attitude towards socialism. I can say, you know, we have some pretty strong, you know, successful kind of socialist countries where there's a lot of equality. There's not too much gap between rich and poor, and people get on better and they have happier lives. There has been in the US, you know, since the 50s, there's been a campaign. And I mean, it makes sense, right? So like when you've got Russia, you know, the second biggest superpower, and it's communist, and then you've got the US, it makes sense that the US needs to completely and utterly demonize that ideology. I'm not saying, for crikey, I'm not saying there's a lot of things wrong with that particular type of socialism there, but the propaganda campaign, just to kind of indoctrinate US citizens into just thinking, just have that amygdala response, just to think that no, it's absolutely evil, socialism's evil, communism's evil, it's complete evil. It's just nonsense.
With Nazism, which is basically a joke, right? And they say socialism and Nazism, it's the same. I mean, come on, you cannot have a normal conversation starting from there, you know? It's not. I don't know, I think yesterday, just the same argument was made on some Brazilian minister, something like that. The German government had to say, you know what, this is completely wrong. This is not, it's not the same. Please grow up. And I've seen, you know, people with a reputation in crypto space say that. I mean, that Nick Szabo, I don't know who else, but there were tons of them, right? And they need to grow up from there, you know.
It's kind of it is the indoctrination. It's hard as well, because these, like you say, the people you deeply respect and admire, yeah. And then some of the US centric stuff which they say, just that they're in this sort of echo chamber of thought, and they can't look outside of it. But yeah, I mean, so one of the biggest problems with the Nazi Party was the National Socialist Party, you know, in Germany, which then we now call the Nazi Party. So that word socialist has kind of clung on there, but you know, they were racist nationalists. They were far right, like.
Far right. They were pro corporations. They didn't care really about social.
And they fought the communists as well. You know, they fought the German communists. And
some mental gymnastics for that kind of people, right?
But yeah. if you're brought up your whole life to think a certain way, then it's very hard to kind of think, well, actually, maybe this thing, this idea, which lurks under the surface, and no matter how much people say is complete evil and terrible, it keeps re-emerging. It keeps being talked about, and then in lots of countries is kind of instigated and is successful. Maybe this thing isn't complete evil nonsense, you know. Maybe we should sort of address it and think about it rationally. On my hat here, so I got this hat. Came in the post today. It's got my silly little logo on, but it also says across the top, it says "Nothing to lose but your chains." That's at the end of the Communist Manifesto. So when Marx and Engels, when they wrote that, they weren't, you know, they didn't want communism to exchange one set of chains for another set of chains. The aim is to liberate. The aim was to liberate people. And it's an interesting point that, you know, pre-Rothbard, you know, for a good few hundred years, the classical libertarianism is very much, the idea was that possession of private property can affect your ability to be liberated. And they were against that kind of accumulation. So it's funny, like, because I would consider myself a libertarian. I want liberty for people. I want people to have you know, personal freedom. I think the best way of doing that is through, you know, access to decent education and so on. But it's funny that, you know, that calling myself a libertarian or libertarian socialist, to then see what libertarian means in the US, and it's very much, you know, eat meat, you know, flipping, just care about yourself. The free market will decide. So Adam Smith, when he wrote about the French Revolution, he said that there will always be people, and it's called the vile maxim, which is that there'll always be people all for ourselves and nothing for other people. And that's very much that attitude of, well, I'm just going to eat meat, you know. Well, the whole world clearly cannot eat meat, and it is in fact bad for the environment, but it's all for ourselves, nothing for other people. Let the free market decide. And
there is, you know, when people talk about the free market, I say, you know, it works nice, it's nice, but at the same time, you have to look at it as the free market is nature, right? People say you cannot go against nature. You can, you know, otherwise you'll be living outside. You know, you protect yourself from droughts, from famine. You get sick. What do? You use technology. You get medicine. You make a house. You make a well. I mean, the idea is that people go against market intervention. You know, if you need to intervene in the market to survive, it is right to do it. It's actually, you know,
it's human.
I mean, yeah, it's nature. I mean, it's
well, I mean, so that is one of those arguments which a lot of people kind of pull out, is that, you know, in nature kills and it's freedom of survival of the fittest and all that stuff, but it completely disregards, you know, herds, packs, swarms, colonies, you know, colonies which work together for a common goal, and will even sacrifice themselves and things for the betterment of their colony. So, you know, within nature, there's lots of examples of people working together. And what is society? That's when people did start working. They stopped smashing each other with rocks and actually started trying to build shit together and make stuff, you know. So yeah, I mean that you know, it doesn't kind of cut the cloth with me. I mean, what free markets do and what capitalism does, you know, is it unleashes this survival of the fittest thing, which is a very powerful force. Also always has been. It's a very powerful technology, and Marx knew this. You know, Marx wrote extensively about the wonders of capital, of free markets, and how they can propel society forward. But he knew that the inevitable, it's where that ends up going. You know, it's not like you have these free markets and then the world is fixed and it's great and everyone lives a happy life forever after. Where does that end up going? Where's the inevitable destination? And it's all for ourselves, nothing for other people. There's these psychopaths who will take over and they will suck value. They will force children to work and enslave people, and they don't care. There's no.
Well, you have to remember that the first corporation was, well, come on. Actually, I don't remember. Was it the West Indies company?
West Indian company, yeah. And this is
industry of exploitation, right? I mean, if you left it unchecked, or, you know, people are, you know, out of their minds, that's the kind of structure they create. So yeah,
no,
I mean,
and I heard something. I can't remember where I heard it, and they were they were talking about during that time when there was a sort of a huge boost for the British economy. They were talking about that time and this sort of starry-eyed, wasn't it wonderful? We had this free market, and we didn't. We had like this corporate, right? We had the West Indian company, and them in Britain, you know, in order for us to be rich, they enslaved China and filled the whole of China with opiates so they could buy more tea from India, and the whole economy was built on the tea trade, and which relied upon Chinese people smoking opium. and that and slavery. So, you know, Christ, man, like that level of wealth accumulation which happened at that time, it had blood on its hands. It was dirty. It was horrible. And then, you know, the interventionists, the socially minded folk, they then addressed those situations and said, you know, we want things like slavery, we want things like child labor, and there was a big move then to you know, to start to try and look after those parts.
Yeah, the left is giving workers that don't care about the left privileges, 8 hours a week, child labor protections, some resemblance of public education. I mean, and we have seen, or we are looking right now at the disintegration of that kind of structure. I don't know how it's gonna look. I mean, I don't have a magic ball or anything, but that's not what I'm into. I'm into well, liberty, that kind of structure that empowers the individual in a reasonable, just way. You know, but not in the just mine, don't take what's mine, or I'm gonna shoot you, or what? Are you gonna shoot me? Come on, that's the world's more complicated than that.
And I think this is kind of the important point is, you know, man, I love Bitcoin. You know, I'm obsessed by the thing, as I'm sure you are. It's very much once you felt that freedom of having financial self-sovereignty. And then get any libertarian watching this, or any neoliberal post-Rothbard libertarian watching this will be like, ah! But you know, you can have freedom in socialism. You know, it's possible. Like we've moved on quite a long way, and there is such thing as state and non-state socialism, and to reduce the role of state or change the way state works so it's less top heavy, it's more bottom down. So, but yeah, no, I think the reason I wanted to try and make a video is because when Bitcoin takes over the world, which I believe it will, when it's the backbone of future society, which I believe it will be, and its underlying technology, are all the socialists of the world, which is, you know, probably more than half the world has socialist leanings, you know, are they suddenly just going to, you know, put their hats up and say, oh no, you know, now we'll release some meat, buy some guns, you know, have a, you know, whatever. They're not. They're gonna try and reconcile their beliefs with Bitcoin, and they're gonna think, well, what can we find within Bitcoin which appeals to our ideology? I think the neoliberal libertarians, I think, you know, they were early adopters. You know, it very much appealed to them, and that they found Bitcoin really early on, and they took ownership of it. I think that's part of the problem is they find it hard. It's a bit like, you know, someone like Roger Ver or something. They kind of find it hard. They have ownership over it. So then who they see as the enemy kind of come in and say, no, actually this thing, I can kind of relate to it, you know, and actually I think it can improve our approach to liberating people. They get very angry about it. So yeah. So I mean, I think it's that reconciling, you know, of socialism and Bitcoin. And to me, you know, Bitcoin's pretty socialist.
Community, people used to do it voluntarily. I'm supposed you run your node. I have mine backed up. I don't run it 24/7 because, right. But there's a lot of things that that require collaboration. That's what I see. A lot of value. You know, if it was just another project like Visa, I mean, who cares? But if you tell, I mean, if you realize that this is we all can own, you know, a part of it, then you have a right to influence it in your own ways, right? I don't know, man.
It's the people's money, you know, for the people, owned by the people, isn't it? So like, so socialism being such a blanket concept of ideas, and not necessarily just being, you know, that very narrow, horrible interpretation which we've seen in history, where basically just psychos take control, which is, you know, nothing different from any other ideology really. So you know, socialism, there's a lot of debate over what it actually is, but if you Google socialism, then it's It would be that it's the means of production, distribution, exchange is owned by the community as a whole. So when you look at Bitcoin and you think, well, okay, how can we think about this now? So, you know, the production, the mining, the development which happens on Bitcoin, you know, that's dependent upon the node software the users run, the community as a whole. So the community as a whole dictates how the users dictate, you know, how that software is being produced, and then the manufacturing, I suppose that would be probably the mining, I suppose, and the exchange of how people exchange with Bitcoin is peer to peer, it's user to user, you know, it's without a trusted third party. So it's very much, you know, about within the community, within its user base. I want the distribution as well. So that's probably the hardest point to kind of reconcile. And you think, well, you know, is the distribution of Bitcoin controlled by the community as a whole? And it's not, but it could be. So if you think about regular normal money and how that's distributed and who distributes that, it's not distributed by the users, it's distributed by, you know, banks and central authorities. But Bitcoin, if, for an example, so one of the big debates which will happen in the future is what do we do with Satoshi Stash? When Bitcoin's the backbone of future society, and these million coins are locked up, people will be terrified that Satoshi's going to waltz in and crash the markets, and all that's going to be hard.
Like the idea. I think it's more likely that they increase the supply. You know, 22 million that taking Satoshi.
I don't know. No, I think the supply thing's going to be capped, but the Satoshi coins, like those million coins which just sat in those wallets, you know, it's dangerous. So what will people do? Will they burn those coins? Will they just flood them onto the market somehow? So maybe just or will they distribute them to, I don't know, the poorest of the people on the planet and try and fight poverty? I imagine it's such a hard. I mean, this is a debate for way down the road, but the point being, the users, the community gets to decide how that is distributed, what happens to it. And even if nothing happens because we physically can't get consensus and we can't, you know.
That's very likely.
Probably the likely scenario, yeah. The very fact that we are the ones who theoretically, if we all agreed on something, could get control over it, means we do have control of the distribution. So we've got the distribution, we've got the production, we've got the exchange. To me, Bitcoin's, you know, it's the people's money for the people, controlled by the users, controlled by the people. So, man, that sounds socialist to me. And then when you look at, you know, further down the line, you know, like why Dowley talked about the smart contracts and all those functions which could be, you know, disintermediated and done using a smart contract. And you look at things like DAOs. I mean, right, the socialists have had worker cooperatives for a very long time, and a DAO is a worker cooperative and distributed, you know, organization. It's a
speculative worker cooperative, but it's amazing.
It is. It's just reinventing the wheel. Like you're making it. Well, I mean, obviously they're very hackable and all that sort of stuff. Now, one day it will work. You know, that software will work. And a DAO will allow ownership, worker ownership. So the example people always give is the decentralized Uber, where the taxi drivers themselves pay a very small fee for having this app. That fee just goes into, I don't know, like bounties on software development or something. And they decide upon what they're going to update and what they're going to change in the software. And then the taxi drivers, you know, themselves own that distributed autonomous organization. So that's a worker cooperative. You know, that's socialist. So there's no way about it.
Smart contracts that owns the insurance, right? that insures the car, pays the guy. I mean, that's doable. I mean, not right now, but yeah, I'm 100% for that idea.
So, and like one of the reasons those ideas are so appealing is because there's this massive disparity of wealth. Obviously, this is incredibly rich rent-seeking people at the top who are sucking value out of the system, and that value, in a world of DAOs, in a world of worker ownership, means that, you know, so how much does a taxi driver get paid? He gets paid 10, 20% more than he would have if he worked for, you know, whoever. if you work for Uber. So that money then goes into the local community and so on. So yeah, I mean, so you're redistributing that wealth, not redistributing the wealth, probably a very bit of a strong loaded term, but you're preventing that rent-seeking behaviour, and then helping that money, settle down on the work.
Down. Once you extract it, it won't trickle down. It goes into pension, into crazy investments, or might as well go to the moon with Jeff Bezos' money stash.
You don't think you're not very hopeful over DAOs being able to make
I got confused. I was thinking of Uber. What do they do with the profits? They go to the moon. They go to any other place, but the local economy.
This is one of my pet hates is when people talk. It's a bit of a tangent, but people talk about taxation and they say taxation is theft. And I think, well, in that privately owned company, there's a bunch of shareholders who are getting their dividends for pretty much doing nothing. They've just bought some shares in the company. They don't provide any value for that company. They're just leeches, just sucking value out of the company to line their own pockets. And then obviously that company then tilts to benefit those people.
I understand they're taking a risk, but the reward they're getting outweighs completely what they're risking. It's rent seeking when you compare it and you see those returns. I mean, damn.
I think that like those egalitarian causes to make that wealth gap smaller. Neoliberal libertarian post-Rothbard. I always feel like I need to give that long neoliberal libertarian post-Rothbard because I just want to say libertarian. But anyway, those folks with the guns and meat eating, they want that too. Like they understand that that's an important thing. But it appears that Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
All right. Okay. Hopefully, I'll come back on in a second. So, anything else to say on that topic, I guess, or?
Let me see. I never asked you, how do you become a Bitcoiner?
How did I become a Bitcoiner? Well, so back in 2007, like everyone in the UK, we're obsessed with property prices here. So back in 2007, a young guy just got out of university, just started my first job. I was very much encouraged to buy a house, buy a flat, so I bought a flat. And then obviously the crash happened, and then I was in this huge negative equity, which sucked. And then a bunch of life circumstances changed, which meant I had to move. So I tried to rent the place, but then the rental market was saturated by all these apartments, which had sprung up during the pump, the boom, which meant that it basically ended up meaning that I missed a few mortgage repayments, and my credit score slowly got eroded away. A young guy as well, it just sucked, and I sort of like, oh, okay, sort of buried my head a little bit in the sand as you do. Anyway, so I ended up, becoming a teacher, obviously, and then I was getting paid a decent wage, and with teaching, you start off on quite a low wage, and then very quickly it kind of ramps up in the UK. So, before I knew it, I was on a pretty good wage. I had one of my uncles died, and he was a pretty wealthy dude, and he left me like, not a huge amount, but enough for a deposit or something on a house. So by then, I'd gotten rid of the flat, and I just had a loan on the amount which I owed for the negative equity. So I thought, okay, so now I've got some money for a deposit. I will try and buy a house. I had a family, and we were renting, so I thought, own your own house. It's very important. And I had it's a decent deposit, decent size deposit. So I went to the bank and said, can I get a mortgage to buy this house? And they were like, no. And they said, your credit history is terrible. And like, when I think of people with a bad credit history, I don't know what the system is in the US, but in the UK, you have a rating, and I was not taught as a child that it's something you should culture, and you should get credit cards and things to boost your rating. I wasn't taught any of that stuff. So You know, so anyway, so when I applied to get this mortgage, they were like, no, your credit rating's too bad. And you know, you're not going to be able to do this for years, you know, like 6, 7, 8 years or whatever, until your credit rating can eke up. Yeah, and they would offer a mortgage, but it was on awful, like, you know, terms. So I was like, okay. You know, I followed Bitcoin. So I took all that and, you know, stuck in Bitcoin. I was like, these banks aren't having any of that. Screw them. And then, you know, ironically, then a few years later, like, it puts me in the position where I'm able to not teach anymore, which I do miss a lot. But obviously, if you've got, you know, a decent stash, then you can do the things you really enjoy, which for me is like, you know, doing Bitcoiny stuff and, you know, spending time with my kids and things. So, you know, it's able to kind of give me a little bit of financial freedom. But no, so it was, and it was funny because when I think about people with bad credit ratings, I would always assume that they lived a lavish lifestyle, got loads of credit cards and bought diamonds and Lambos and drank champagne or whatever, you know, not just some young dude like trying to do what everyone else is doing, you know, trying to have some ownership of a house or a flat or whatever, because everyone else is doing that, and then being screwed over by, you know, the boom and bust, you know, cycle. So yeah, so that kind of, I mean, and again, you know, that kind of like makes you think, well, there are victims. I'm Christ, you know, I'm gonna call myself a victim, you know, I'm in a very privileged position in life, like, but there are victims when you have these boom bust cycles. And you're always going to have these boom bust cycles, and the sorts of markets we've got.
You know, people that just want a normal life get sucked in well, a crisis. They have no real part.
Yeah, I mean, like, so, you know, the banksters which caused the 2008 crisis, you know, they're criminals, like, and there was no justice. And what was really interesting, and to me, and this is kind of why I thought, okay, with Bitcoin, people can't ignore the socialist debate, because when the crisis, I don't know what it's like in the US, but when the crisis happened, I remember listening to the radio, and they were like, oh, is that capitalism dead now? Is that the end of capitalism? Do we need to find another system? Do we need to be more socialist? Blah blah blah. And there was that kind of talk. And this is what happens. Like, so when we have our next financial crisis, all those ideas will reemerge. And I think it's fairly agreed upon that the next crisis is going to be pretty gnarly and probably a lot harder than the last one. And all these ideologies are going to come out. Bitcoin is going to be there as an option for opting, taking your money out of that system, and taking it out of a sort of an inflationary system, which leans heavily towards the people at the top. So yeah, and people are going to have to reconcile it with sort of socialist ideas of. So yeah, so I mean, what was it like in the US at that time? Did people talk that way?
I don't know how fairly old, but I see a bunch of people worried, not worried, but, you know, not sleeping, families disintegrating, divorcing, going back to TJ because I live close to the border, so I saw a bunch of that, you know, a bunch of people that were left with nothing, and they had to downgrade in many ways. I saw angry teachers too. I was in high school. They were, I could see them, you know, working hard and not having stability. That left me thinking of what I'm gonna do, because these guys did everything right and they're having problems right now. So I got into Bitcoin in that thinking, you know, first of all, I gotta save myself, you know, and I got into internet, Max Kaiser things, conspiracy theories. But then when Julian Assange did the program The World Tomorrow, I heard that this Bitcoin thing was legit, and it's when I was like, huh, maybe. but I didn't buy it by that time. I just had it in my radar, bought at the top like everybody, and from there I started reading and doing stuff kind of related to that. Are you there?
Yeah, no, I am. Sorry, I am. Yeah, for some reason, I was kind of expecting my camera to come back on, but
Yeah, I can't see you either.
it's really yeah. Oh, no, I thought it might come back on there.
Been a while.
I'm tempted to fiddle, but then I think if I fiddle, I might just break the whole thing because it's the first time doing this. So maybe I'll just leave it off. If you can hear me, that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. No, yeah, no. So that absolutely. I mean, you know, Max Kite is obviously brilliant, and I remember at the time during the financial crisis, he was a real trooper, you know, and he really did try and hold some of those people account, but he just got away with it. You know, the whole system's geared to let those sorts of people get away with it, and it's not a case of let banks fail because that fucks over the little one. You know, it's a case of hold the people who got make people who benefit from those scenarios, hold them accountable, and disincentivize them to do it again, put them in prison. You know, that's very important. Whereas now, you know, they committed these huge crimes against people, and then they're able to just kind of carry on, you know, and to continue to kind of line their pockets, and that gap, that wealth gap, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I suppose that's kind of where we come to. So I mean, so that's why you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We've talked about sort of our how we reconcile Bitcoin and socialism, I guess. So I guess the next bit is you know, where we imagine Bitcoin going in the future. So where do you imagine Bitcoin going in the future?
Okay, well, first of all, we are so few Bitcoiners. You know, the rest of the world is not going to buy Bitcoin. They're not going to sign up for Coinbase. I think that it's gonna morph. It's gonna blend into the, you know, world of commerce. People are gonna start using it without knowing, or not even buying it, but being the bedrock of the credit system. You know, because a lot of people say, well, the banks are responsible. They deserve to die. They are incredibly necessary for the economy of the world. I mean, if another one fails, you know, the Wales is going to declare in bankruptcy. So I think that Bitcoin can serve as a way to regulate it better. You know, credit, people are going to start to use credit more responsibly. It's well, you know, what was I going to say? Sorry.
You reminded me of something. While you're thinking there, you reminded me of something that because Hal Finney always said that because of the scaling issue, that he imagined Bitcoin would be kind of the settlement layer. I mean, I do think that it will probably be that, but then also people then will be able to kind of plug into the system, as we're seeing with these sort of side chains and second layer. But yeah, ultimately, obviously, it's going to be the settlement layer in the background, just because of the way it scales. Yeah, but Hal Finney, he thought the same as you. You know, he thought that's what he believed. I mean, I suppose this is before the innovation of second layer, but yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so here's the thing: there has to be two monies, right? I mean, Bitcoin and the normal credit world. I just think that Bitcoin is going to complement credit. You know, dollars are still going to be around, but I think they're going to be more reliable. I mean, dollar has always been reliable, but I mean, Mexican pesos, Nigerian, Venezuelan bolivars. I mean, that thing's a joke. It needs to get serious and do something stable. And I think the supply cap, the 21 million Bitcoins in the economy, in the world, it's going to make a good base. And then,
I agree. I mean, like, so John Nash wrote about that. John Nash with his ideal money, he said that, I mean, ideal money, basically, from what I can gather from the gist of it, is that there will be this competitor to like government money, and then government will have to compete with it. And that makes sense. Like Bitcoin comes along, suddenly people have this option to opt out, and then that encourages governments to behave with it, with their monetary policy. That's cool. That's a good thing, you know, and I kind of think, you know, if Bitcoin weren't to take over, but if it were to be this thing which encouraged to encourage governments to behave, or else people just switch to Bitcoin. That's cool. Like that just gives people better money anyway. So even if they're not using Bitcoin, just having it there as this universal option which everyone can plug into. But I think
someone doing with $10 a day or less, backing down their seed, writing down their seed of the private key to, you know, escape from their government. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You are for the government structure. It's your only hope. I mean, whatever you can get from there. But I used to be a big proponent of, you know, Bitcoin's gonna liberate people all over the world. It's not that easy. I think that governments have to step up, sadly enough.
Yeah. I think you're very correct in this kind, and this is part of the problem that with Bitcoin is I mean, we get so excited about the technology, and you throw that neoliberal libertarianism into there as well, and they just think, okay, this is going to be brilliant. This is going to make all these free markets. Everything's going to be fixed. Education is going to be fixed. Health is going to be fixed. Everything's going to be fixed. The way we police people is going to be fixed. Everything's going to work, and going to get rid of government is going to be great. It's just bollocks. Like the world, like you say, is complicated. It's not black and white. It requires taking the best of a lot of systems and trying to get it to work. Bitcoin is going to have massive impact, and it is going to really affect things. It is going to make things a lot better. But yeah, I mean, like you say, you're not going to dig people out of extreme poverty with just Bitcoin alone. We need you know, more sort of socially minded thinking.
We need water. People are dying. Well, people are sick and inflamed in the first world. And I mean, there are so many basic things that are saving people right now. I mean, as much hate as Bill Gates gets, he's bringing water, wealth, and all that stuff in a bigger scale.
Here's something to kind of think about is you know, with this idea of just having free markets and that'll fix everything, is how to future-proof society. You know, like, so in the future there will be less people working until eventually probably none of us will work, and that's probably okay, because there have been societies who've done that in the past. The Greeks, you know, 2/3 of them were slaves, and the third of actual proper Greek citizens, they didn't do anything. They didn't have to work. You know, most of them sat around having orgies and eating grapes. And then a few of them came up with things like politics and science and philosophy and some pretty good stuff. So, you know, there's nothing wrong in having a society of people who don't work, because it frees people up to do awesome, cool, amazing stuff if they want to, on a voluntary basis. But then if it's all free markets and everyone's just working, how do people earn wages if there's no jobs? If AI is doing all those jobs for them, you know? And that's where you start thinking, well, there's a universal basic income, you know, there's a universal right to some value. And then maybe you can, if you want, you can voluntarily produce more value but then that universal basic income, you know, that's something which is that being spoken about in the US a lot at the moment, the universal basic income idea?
Not universal basic income, but the idea that what's going to happen with our jobs, that's very prescient. I, for one, will be very interested in looking, you know, I'll be interested in knowing how does the human progress looks, because at the moment when there's no job for you, you have to think what it's the rest of humanity gonna look like. And there's, of course, two ways. It's gonna look like Elysium, where, you know, people leave Earth, live in paradise, and the rest stay here, you know, living with environmental catastrophe and all that stuff. Or, you know, we work towards a fairer society that cares for everybody and regulates a lot of stuff, because with more people on the planet, there has to be order. I mean, and I rather have a more socially minded order than, you know, just chaos.
Well, if it's something you don't address, then it's something which is just going to cause chaos, you know. So as people start to lose their jobs, I think, I can't remember the book. It was really good, but I think it's called, is it called Human Capitalism? The book, that's about universal basic income, I think. I don't want to say it is, but I think it is. And in that, he talks about lorry drivers, and the lorry drivers in the US, that they're actually quite unionized and they're pretty together, and they all own their own lorries. In 5 to 10 years, there's probably not going to be any human lorry drivers, because it makes so much more financial sense to do it just with automated lorries, sorry. So what do you do with that massive workforce of thousands and thousands of lorry drivers who've got access to their own lorries, probably got loans and things to pay for those lorries? They could really like screw up America. They could cause some pretty big unrest. They blockade a couple of freeways and suddenly all those produce aren't getting shipped around America. Like it's so I think, even these are issues which are going to have to be addressed. Like, so in the book, he was saying that I think it made more financial sense to pay all of them. I think it was like $30,000 a year just to stay at home and do nothing, and then have these automated lorries ship goods around the US. It would make more financial sense to do that than employ lorry drivers to move those goods.
There are a lot of things that don't make sense economically in the US, like incarceration. It costs something like $50,000 to keep somebody a year in jail or in prison. The military, I think we have a bloated military. I mean, I'm a pacifist. One of the reasons I was initially attracted to libertarianism, American libertarianism, where, they were pacifists, they were not aggression and that stuff, and I'm all for it, The healthcare, American healthcare is so expensive. If we had single payer, that kind of structure, which would look like the European ones, so much money will be saved. Those resources will be used in somewhere else, some other way.
This is like, it's a symptom of the indoctrination, though. So like the US, I think there's like a WHO study I was looking at the other day, and they were 37th in the world for their quality of healthcare. And then you look at the top countries, and they've all got universal access to healthcare, all of them. So then someone said, it's on some Twitter feed or something, they said that, well, the US, they're the ones who produce all the new drugs, and then all the other countries benefit from these new drugs. And that's actually kind of an issue. Like, so in the US, you've got this problem with big pharma, and you've got all these people we don't take the amount of drugs which the US takes. And then, so there's a lot of, you see all the, what I can see, there's adverts and things on the TV in the US for drugs. We don't have any of that stuff, and we've still got a better healthcare system. And it worked. I then looked at another study, and that study said, well, actually, the UK, Germany, France, we all contribute more to R&D on new drugs and new treatments. But the amount of money we pump into pharmaceuticals is so much smaller, that obviously then the US have this. So the price you pay for all those treatments and discoveries, because the US is actually contributing less to R&D percentage-wise, but the price paid is, you have a nation of pill poppers, which just kind of sucks. But yeah, 37th, that's embarrassing, for the world's superpower. And it's an easily remedied thing. You to take any of those models, they work. Any of the European models, some of them are better than others, but they work better than the American model, and just use it. But you can't, because there's this indoctrination. There's this idea that you're paying for somebody else, and it's nonsense. So yeah. So I think that does kind of bring us to a close, does it? I suppose we've got a bit of a rant there at the end, but yeah. So I'm a socialist. I like Bitcoin. I'm going to stop being a socialist. I'm not going to become a libertarian, start shooting people and eating meat. I'll always be a socialist, but I always also absolutely adore and love Bitcoin. And I appreciate its ability to make the world more accountable and make the world a better place. Any closing thoughts?
No, same here. I'm Oliver, and I'm a socialist, and I like Bitcoin, and I want to see human progress.
Cool, man. Well, I'm not sure anyone else has ever covered this topic, so prepare for some hate mail from the libertarians. But yeah, I think it went pretty well. I'd like to do another one, try and find some of the social. I'm sure there's some others somewhere, hiding some rocks we can pull in and make another video with. What do you reckon?
That's fine by me. We're first.
It's cool.
Okay.
All right. Cheers, Oliver.
Man.
Thanks. Bye-bye.